The bruise bloomed purple across Zelda Ramsey's cheekbone like a poisonous flower. And as she stumbled through the dusty streets of Columbia, California in the scorching summer of 1883, she knew she couldn't go back home tonight or maybe ever again. Her stepmother's rage had been instant and explosive over nothing more than a chipped teacup, one measly crack in the porcelain that Zelda hadn't even caused. But Alina Ramsey needed no real reason to unleash her fury on the girl who reminded her too much of the first wife, the beloved wife, the dead wife whose shoes Alina could never fill. Zelda pressed her fingers gently against the throbbing skin and winced, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. She was 20 years old and should have left this house years ago, but her father's mining accident 3 months back had left her trapped with Alina and no means of escape. The August heat beat down mercilessly on the California gold country, and sweat mixed with tears as she walked without direction. Just away, always away. The saloon at the end of Main Street was called the Golden Nugget, and Zelda had never set foot inside such an establishment in her life. Respectable women didn't, but right now she felt anything but respectable with her torn collar and bruised face and nowhere else to go. She pushed through the swinging doors and immediately felt every eye in the place turn toward her. "Miss, you all right?" The bartender's voice cut through the sudden silence, concern evident in his weathered face. Zelda opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Her knees buckled, and she would have hit the sawdust-covered floor if strong hands hadn't caught her first. She looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a dusty brown hat. The man who held her was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a gentleness in his grip that seemed at odds with the gun belt strapped around his narrow hips. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and warm. "I've got you." "I'm sorry," Zelda whispered, trying to pull away, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "I shouldn't be here." "You're exactly where you need to be," the stranger said firmly. He guided her to a chair at a corner table, and the other patrons slowly returned to their drinks and card games, though she could still feel their curious glances. "My name is Fletcher Thornton. What's yours, Zelda Ramsey?" She looked down at her trembling hands, shame burning hotter than the bruise on her face. Fletcher settled into the chair across from her and signaled the bartender. "Bring some water and a clean cloth, would you, Pete?" He turned his attention back to Zelda, and his expression darkened as he took in the full extent of her injury. "Who did this to you?" "It doesn't matter," Zelda said quickly. "It was my fault. I was careless." "Careless how?" Fletcher's voice remained gentle, but something hard flickered in those blue eyes. "I broke a teacup." "Well, I didn't break it, but it was in my hands when she found it broken, so she assumed." Zelda trailed off, realizing how absurd it sounded. A teacup. Her stepmother had done this over a teacup. Fletcher leaned back in his chair, and when he spoke, his words were measured and deliberate. "Mistakes don't matter here." Zelda's head snapped up, meeting his gaze. "What?" "I said mistakes don't matter here. Even if you had broken that cup, even if you'd broken 100 cups, no one has the right to lay hands on you like that." He accepted the water and cloth from Pete with a nod of thanks, then dampened the fabric and held it out to her. "May I?" Something in his quiet courtesy, in the respect he showed her even in her disheveled state, made Zelda's throat tighten with emotion. She nodded, and Fletcher leaned forward, gently pressing the cool cloth against her bruised cheek. His touch was feather-light, careful not to cause more pain, and Zelda found herself studying his face. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. "You're a cowboy," she observed, noting the dust on his clothes, and the way he moved with an economy of motion common to men who spent their days in the saddle. Ranch hand, mostly. Work for the Double T spread about 5 miles outside town. Came in today to pick up supplies and check on a horse I've got boarded at the livery. He continued his ministrations, his movements tender and sure. You live in Columbia all my life, Zelda said. My father worked the mines until he died in a cave in this spring. Left me with my stepmother, who never wanted me around even when he was alive. No other family, none that I know of. My mother died when I was born and my father was an only child. Eleanor, my stepmother, she has a sister in Sacramento, but I've never met her. Zelda accepted the cloth when Fletcher handed it back to her, holding it against her face. I have nowhere to go. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. The Double T is run by Thomas and Martha Thornton, my parents. They're good people, fair employers, and they've been talking about needing help in the house. Martha's been doing too much on her own, and my father keeps telling her to find someone to help with the cooking and cleaning. You interested in honest work? Hope flared in Zelda's chest, bright and unexpected. You would do that for me. You don't even know me. I know you're hurting and you need help. That's enough. Fletcher stood and offered his hand. Come on, let's get you out of town before your stepmother comes looking. We can swing by your house so you can pack your things, or if you'd rather not risk it, my mother probably has clothes that would fit you. Zelda took his hand and rose on shaky legs. I need to get my mother's Bible and the photograph of my parents. Everything else can stay. Then we'll be quick about it. Fletcher kept her hand in his palm warm and calloused against hers, and led her out of the saloon into the blazing afternoon sun. Where's your house? Up on Pine Street, the white one with green shutters. Zelda's heart hammered against her ribs as they walked. What if she's there? Then I'll have words with her, Fletcher said simply. But if she's got any sense, she won't start trouble with me present. They moved quickly through the familiar streets, and Zelda found herself constantly glancing at the man beside her. Fletcher Thornton was a stranger who had appeared at exactly the moment she needed him most, offering kindness without expectation of anything in return. It seemed too good to be true, and yet his hand remained steady in hers, anchoring her to this unexpected lifeline. The house on Pine Street looked quiet and peaceful in the afternoon light, betraying nothing of the violence that had occurred within its walls just an hour before. Zelda's steps slowed as they approached, and Fletcher squeezed her hand gently. I'm right here with you, he said. They climbed the porch steps together, and Zelda pushed open the front door. The parlor was empty, though she could hear movement from the kitchen at the back of the house. Her bedroom was upstairs, and she moved as quietly as possible, Fletcher following close behind. Her room was small and simply furnished, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a trunk at the foot of the bed that held her few possessions. She knelt beside the trunk and lifted the lid, pulling out her mother's worn leather Bible and the silver-framed photograph of her parents on their wedding day. Her father looked so young and happy, his arm around a woman who had Zelda's same dark hair and wide eyes. She traced her mother's face with one finger, grief welling up fresh and sharp. She was beautiful, Fletcher said softly from where he stood by the door, keeping watch. I wish I had known her. Zelda tucked the Bible and photograph into a cloth bag, then grabbed a few changes of clothes and her mother's cameo brooch. It wasn't much to show for 20 years of life, but it was all that truly mattered. Zelda Rose Ramsey, is that you up there? Eleanor's voice rang out from downstairs, sharp and accusatory. Zelda froze, terror flooding through her. Fletcher moved immediately to her side, taking the bag from her nerveless fingers. Stay behind me, he said, then raised his voice. Mrs. Ramsey, My name is Fletcher Thornton from the Double T Ranch. I'm here to help Miss Ramsey collect her belongings. She'll be working for my family from now on." The sound of footsteps on the stairs was rapid and angry. Alina burst into the room, her thin face twisted with fury. She was a small woman, but rage made her seem larger, more dangerous. "You have no right to be in this house. Zelda, you ungrateful girl, after everything I've done for you." "After everything you've done?" Fletcher's voice remained calm, but it carried an edge of steel. "You mean like giving her that bruise on her face? That what you're referring to?" Alina's eyes narrowed. "She's clumsy. Always has been. Broke one of my best teacups. Even if she had, and I'm not saying she did, that gives you no right to strike her." Fletcher positioned himself more fully between Zelda and her stepmother. "She's leaving now, and you won't try to stop her. Are we clear? She's nothing but trouble. You'll see soon enough." Alina's lips curled into a cruel approximation of a smile. "She'll bring you nothing but heartache and disappointment, just like she did to her poor father. Probably what killed him, the worry over having such a useless daughter." Zelda flinched as if she had been struck again, and Fletcher's jaw tightened. "That's enough. Miss Ramsey, let's go." They descended the stairs quickly, Alina's voice following them. "Don't you come back here when this doesn't work out. You're not welcome in this house ever again." The words should have hurt, but as Zelda stepped out into the sunlight with Fletcher beside her, she felt only relief. The door to her past closed behind her with a definitive click, and she realized she had been holding her breath. She released it now in a shaky exhale. "You all right?" Fletcher asked, studying her face with concern. "I think so." Zelda clutched her bag to her chest. "Thank you for standing up to her. No one ever has before." "Then they should have." Fletcher guided her toward the livery stable at the end of the street. "We'll take my horse. It's a bit of a ride to the ranch, but Lucky is strong enough to carry us both." The livery was dim and cool after the brightness outside, smelling of hay and leather and horses. Fletcher led her to a stall where a magnificent chestnut gelding stood, his coat gleaming even in the low light. The horse nickered softly when he saw Fletcher, and the cowboy smiled, the first real smile Zelda had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him somehow younger and more handsome. "This is Lucky," Fletcher said, stroking the horse's neck with obvious affection. "Found him half-starved on the range 3 years ago. Nursed him back to health, and he's been my partner ever since." "He's beautiful," Zelda said, reaching out tentatively to touch the horse's soft nose. Lucky huffed warm breath against her palm, and she smiled despite everything. Fletcher saddled Lucky with practiced efficiency, then swung up into the saddle and reached down for Zelda. "Put your foot in the stirrup and take my hand. I'll pull you up behind me." It took some awkward maneuvering, especially with her bag, but soon Zelda found herself seated behind Fletcher, her arms wrapped around his waist to keep her balance. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady rise and fall of his breathing, and something about it made her feel safer than she had in months. They rode out of Columbia heading west, and Zelda watched the town shrink behind them. She had lived there her entire life, but she felt no sadness at leaving, only a tentative, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change for the better. The landscape around them was golden with summer drought, the grass dry and the creek beds low. Oak trees provided occasional shade, and in the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose blue and hazy against the sky. Fletcher rode with easy confidence, and Lucky maintained a smooth, ground eating pace that covered the miles quickly. "Tell me about your parents," Zelda said after a while, needing to break the silence. "My father, Thomas, he came out here in '49 during the gold rush. Didn't make much as a miner, but he was smart enough to realize that the real money was in supplying the miners. Started with a small herd of cattle, grew it over the years. Met my mother, Martha, in '52. She was a widow with a young son, my older brother Jacob, who died of fever 10 years ago. I was born in '57, so I'm 26 now. My parents, they're good people. Fair and honest. You'll like them. What if they don't want me? The fear that had been lurking at the edges of Zelda's mind finally found voice. What if they think your father bringing home a strange woman is inappropriate? Fletcher glanced back over his shoulder, and his expression was reassuring. My mother has been praying for help for months. She'll see your arrival as an answer to those prayers. And my father trusts my judgment. Besides, once they see your face and hear your story, they'll understand why I couldn't leave you in that town. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when they crested a rise and Fletcher pointed ahead. There it is, the Double T. Zelda looked down into a broad valley where a ranch house and several outbuildings nestled near a creek lined with cottonwood trees. The house itself was larger than she had expected, built of timber and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around at least 2 sides. Corrals held horses and cattle, and she could see chickens scratching in a yard near what was probably the barn. Smoke rose from the chimney and warm light glowed in the windows as evening approached. It's wonderful, Zelda breathed. Fletcher urged Lucky down the slope, and as they drew nearer, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the lowering sun. She was perhaps 50, with graying brown hair pinned up in a simple bun and a capable, kind face. When she spotted Fletcher and his passenger, her expression shifted to surprise and then concern. "Fletcher," she called, "is everything all right?" Fletcher dismounted and helped Zelda down, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow when she swayed slightly after the long ride. "Mother, this is Miss Zelda Ramsey from Columbia. She needs help, and we need help in the house. Seemed like Providence to me." Martha Thornton's eyes took in Zelda's bruised face and disheveled appearance, and her expression softened with understanding and sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear. Come inside right now. Fletcher, take care of Lucky. I'll get Miss Ramsey settled." Before Zelda could protest, she found herself being ushered into the ranch house with a maternal efficiency that was both comforting and overwhelming. The interior was warm and welcoming, with sturdy furniture and colorful rag rugs, and the smell of something delicious cooking. Martha led her to a chair at a large kitchen table and immediately began bustling about, heating water and gathering supplies. "Now then," Martha said, her voice gentle but firm. "Let's get you cleaned up proper and see to that bruise. Then you can tell me everything, but only if you want to. No pressure." Tears stung Zelda's eyes at the simple kindness. "Your son saved me today. I had nowhere to go, and he offered me a job without even knowing me. Fletcher's always had a good heart and a strong sense of right and wrong. Takes after his father that way." Martha brought over a basin of warm water and clean cloths, along with a jar of something that smelled of herbs. "This is a salve I make myself. It'll help with the bruising and any pain." "May I?" Zelda nodded, and Martha began to carefully clean her face and apply the salve. Her touch was gentle and motherly, and Zelda felt something inside her begin to unknot, some tight coil of fear and tension finally starting to release. "I'm a good worker," Zelda said, needing Martha to know. "I can cook and clean and sew. I'll earn my keep, I promise." "I don't doubt that for a moment, dear. But right now, let's focus on getting you fed and rested. Tomorrow will be soon enough to talk about work." Martha finished with the salve and sat back, studying Zelda with thoughtful eyes. "You've been through something terrible today, haven't you?" The whole story came pouring out then. Everything about her father's death and Aliner's cruelty, and the broken teacup, that had been the final straw. Martha listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled as Zelda spoke. When the tale was finished, the older woman reached across the table and took Zelda's hands in her own. "You're safe now," Martha said firmly. "No one will hurt you here. You have my word on that." The back door opened, and Fletcher entered along with a man who could only be his father. Thomas Thornton was tall like his son, with the same blue eyes but hair that had gone completely white. He had the weathered, capable look of a man who had spent his life working the land, and his handshake when he greeted Zelda was firm and calloused. "Fletcher told me what happened," Thomas said, his voice a deep rumble. "You're welcome here, Miss Ramsey, for as long as you need or want to stay." "I'll work hard," Zelda promised. "I won't be a burden." "I don't imagine you will be." Thomas settled into a chair at the head of the table. "Martha's been after me to find help for months, but finding someone trustworthy isn't easy. If Fletcher vouches for you, that's good enough for me." Dinner that night was roast chicken with vegetables from Martha's garden and fresh bread still warm from the oven. Zelda ate more than she had in weeks, her appetite returning now that the constant tension of living with a leaner was gone. The conversation flowed easily around the table, with Thomas and Martha asking gentle questions about her life and interests, while Fletcher mostly listened, his blue eyes often on her face with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. After dinner, Martha showed Zelda to a small bedroom on the second floor. It was simply furnished but clean and comfortable, with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt and a window that looked out over the valley. Zelda set her few possessions on the dresser and ran her hand over the soft quilt, hardly believing this was real. "The wash house is out back if you want to bathe," Martha said from the doorway. "I'll bring you one of my nightgowns and some clothes for tomorrow. We're about the same size, I think. You can make do with mine until we can sew you some of your own." "You've already done so much," Zelda protested weakly. "Nonsense. It's nothing more than common Christian charity, and besides, I have a feeling we're going to be good friends." Martha smiled warmly. "Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow is a new day." After Martha left, Zelda sank down onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. Not tears of pain or fear this time, but of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. In the space of a few hours, her entire life had changed. She had gone from trapped and hopeless to safe and welcome, all because of a kind cowboy with blue eyes who had said that mistakes don't matter. The next morning, Zelda woke early to sunlight streaming through her window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was, but then memory returned, and with it, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a very long time. She dressed in the simple calico dress Martha had left for her and made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee. Martha was already in the kitchen rolling out dough for biscuits. She looked up with a smile when Zelda entered. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Zelda admitted. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Thornton. It's Martha, please, and you're very welcome." She gestured toward the coffee pot. "Help yourself, then if you're feeling up to it, you can start learning the routine around here. Nothing too strenuous today, just getting your bearings." They fell into an easy rhythm, and Zelda discovered that Martha was not only kind but also an excellent teacher. She showed Zelda where everything was kept, explained the daily and weekly tasks, and shared tips and tricks she had learned over decades of ranch living. The work was familiar but somehow more satisfying here, without a leaner's constant criticism and impossible standards. Fletcher appeared at mid-morning, dusty from whatever work he had been doing outside. His eyes immediately sought out Zelda, and she saw relief in his expression when he found her smiling and relaxed. "How are you settling in?" he asked. "Very well, thanks to your mother." Zelda was suddenly shy, aware of how she must look in her borrowed dress with her hair pinned up simply. "I hope I can repay your family's kindness. You already are by helping my mother." Fletcher accepted the cup of coffee Martha handed him with a grateful nod. "I was thinking, if you're not too tired, maybe I could show you around the ranch properly this afternoon. Help you get familiar with the place." "I'd like that," Zelda said, pleasure warming her cheeks. Martha made a shooing motion with her hands. "Go on, both of you. I can manage lunch on my own. Fletcher, show her the creek and the oak grove. It's beautiful up there." So that afternoon, Zelda found herself walking beside Fletcher along a well-worn path that led away from the ranch buildings and up into the hills. The day was warm but not oppressively hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of dry grass and wildflowers. Fletcher kept his stride measured to match hers, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the ranch and the land. "That's where I broke my arm when I was 12, he said, indicating a large oak tree. "Climbed up to rescue a cat and fell on the way down. My brother Jacob laughed himself sick, then carried me home." "Your mother mentioned he died," Zelda said carefully. "I'm sorry." Fletcher's expression grew somber. "Fever took him fast. One day he was fine, 3 days later he was gone. It was hard on all of us, but especially my mother. She and Jacob were very close." "Is that why you're so protective?" Zelda asked. "Why you helped me yesterday, maybe partly." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, then continued. "But mostly it's just because I couldn't walk away when someone needed help. My parents raised me to believe that character is measured by how you treat people who can't do anything for you in return. You're a good man, Fletcher Thornton. I try to be." He smiled at her, and Zelda's heart did a strange little skip in her chest. They reached the creek, which despite the dry season still had a decent flow of water burbling over smooth stones. Cottonwood trees provided dappled shade, and the sound of the water was soothing. Fletcher led her to a flat rock near the bank, and they sat together, watching the play of light on the water. "Can I ask you something?" Fletcher said after a while. "Of course." "What do you want, Zelda? For your future, I mean. What are your dreams?" No one had ever asked her that before. Zelda thought carefully before answering. "I want to feel safe. I want to do work that matters and be around people who value me. Beyond that, I don't know. I never let myself dream too much because it hurt too badly when those dreams didn't come true." "You can dream now," Fletcher said softly. "You're free of her. You can be whoever and whatever you want to be." Zelda looked at him, at his earnest face and kind eyes, and felt something shift inside her. This man who had known her for barely 24 hours seemed to believe in her more than anyone ever had. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "What about you?" she asked. "What are your dreams?" Fletcher picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his fingers. "I want to keep this ranch running after my parents are gone. I want to build something lasting. And I want a family of my own someday. A wife who's my partner and friend, children to carry on what we've built. Simple dreams, maybe, but they're mine." "They don't sound simple to me," Zelda said. "They sound wonderful." Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a connection, the first fragile thread of something that could become much more given time. Fletcher reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind Zelda's ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Your bruise is already looking better," he said quietly. "Your mother's salve works wonders." Zelda's voice came out breathier than she intended. Fletcher's hand dropped away, and he stood, offering her his hand to help her up. "Come on. There's more to see." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Zelda worked alongside Martha during the days, learning not just the tasks but the rhythms of ranch life. She discovered she had a talent for baking, and her pies became a fixture at the dinner table. She mended clothes and helped with the garden, and slowly began to feel like she was truly contributing, truly earning her place. In the evenings, after the work was done, Fletcher would often find reasons to seek her out. Sometimes they would walk together in the cool twilight. Other times they would sit on the porch and talk while the stars came out overhead. Zelda learned about his childhood and his hopes for the ranch. She told him about her mother and the stories her father used to tell about his brief, happy marriage. Thomas and Martha watched this growing connection with approval, never interfering but offering quiet encouragement. Martha told Zelda one day while they were preserving peaches that she hadn't seen Fletcher so happy since before Jacob died. "He's a good man, but he can be too serious sometimes," Martha confided. "You bring out a lightness in him that I'd worried was gone for good." "He saved me," Zelda said simply. "I'll never forget that. He's rather smitten with you, you know." Martha's eyes twinkled with gentle amusement. "In case you hadn't noticed," Zelda felt her cheeks heat, "I've noticed, I just don't quite know what to do about it. Do you have feelings for him?" "Yes." The admission came easily because it was so obviously true. Somewhere in the past few weeks, Zelda had fallen completely and hopelessly in love with Fletcher Thornton. She loved his quiet strength and his gentle humor. She loved the way he treated his parents with respect and his horse with affection. She loved how he looked at her like she was precious and worth protecting. "Then the rest will work itself out," Martha said with the confidence of someone who had been happily married for 30 years. The turning point came on a warm evening in early September. Fletcher had asked Zelda if she would ride out with him to check on some cattle in the far pasture, and she had agreed eagerly. She had been learning to ride over the past weeks, and while she wasn't as confident as Fletcher, she could manage Martha's gentle mare without too much difficulty. They rode out as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The cattle were fine, peacefully grazing in the gathering dusk, so Fletcher and Zelda dismounted near a cluster of oak trees and let the horses graze while they talked. "I got a letter from someone in Columbia today," Fletcher said, his tone careful. "The postmaster's wife, actually. She wanted me to know that your stepmother left town about a week ago, sold the house and all its contents and moved to Sacramento to live with her sister." Zelda absorbed this information with mixed emotions. "I suppose I should have expected that. Without my father's mining income and no one to bully, there was no reason for her to stay. The letter also said that several people in town have been asking about you, wondering if you're all right. Apparently, your stepmother's treatment of you was more widely known than you might have thought, and folks were glad to hear you'd found a safe place." "I never knew anyone noticed," Zelda said softly. "People see more than we think they do." Fletcher moved closer, near enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling evening air. "Zelda, there's something I need to say to you." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "These past weeks with you here have been the best I can remember in a long time. You fit into our lives like you were always meant to be here. My mother adores you, my father respects you, and I—" He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I've fallen in love with you, completely and thoroughly in love with you. I know it's fast, and I know you've been through a lot, and I'll understand if you don't feel the same way, but I had to tell you. I couldn't keep it inside any longer." Joy bubbled up inside Zelda, bright and effervescent. "Fletcher, I love you too. I think I started falling for you the moment you caught me in that saloon and told me that mistakes don't matter here." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "You mean it, with all my heart." Fletcher cupped her face gently in his hands, mindful of the bruise that had now faded to a faint yellow smudge, and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Zelda melted into it, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and grinning. "Marry me," Fletcher said. "I know it's soon, but I don't want to wait. I want to build that future with you. I want you as my partner and my wife." "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed again, longer this time, sealing the promise between them. When they finally made their way back to the ranch, hand in hand and radiating happiness, Martha took one look at their faces and let out a delighted laugh. "Finally," she said, pulling them both into a hug. "Thomas, break out the good whiskey. We have a wedding to plan." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Columbia. Despite her unhappy associations with the town, Zelda wanted to be married there in the place where her parents had wed 21 years before. The church was simple but beautiful, with wooden pews worn smooth by generations of worshippers and windows that let in the golden October light. Martha had helped Zelda make a dress of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Zelda wore her mother's cameo at her throat and carried a bouquet of the last roses from Martha's garden. Fletcher wore his Sunday best and couldn't stop smiling, his blue eyes bright with joy and love. Thomas walked Zelda down the aisle, having offered to stand in for her late father, and when he placed her hand in Fletcher's, he said quietly, "Take care of each other." They promised they would. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, and when the pastor pronounced them man and wife, Fletcher kissed his bride with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance dabbed at their eyes. The reception was held at the ranch, with neighbors and friends bringing food and well wishes. Someone had a fiddle, and there was dancing on the lawn as the sun set and lanterns were lit against the gathering dark. "Happy?" Fletcher asked as they swayed together to a slow song. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Zelda replied, resting her head against his chest and feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Me too." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for saving me." "We saved each other," Fletcher corrected gently. "That's how the best marriages work." They spent their wedding night in the small house Thomas, and several neighbors had helped Fletcher build over the past weeks. It sat on a rise about half a mile from the main ranch house, giving them privacy while keeping them close to family. It was just 4 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs, and Zelda had never loved any place more. The years that followed were good ones, full of hard work and simple joys. Zelda bloomed in the safety and love of her new life, discovering strengths and talents she had never known she possessed. She became an integral part of the ranch operations, keeping the books and managing supplies with an efficiency that impressed even Thomas. Fletcher proved to be exactly the husband she had hoped for, supportive and affectionate and unwavering in his devotion. They worked side by side during the days and fell into each other's arms at night, building a partnership that was as much about friendship as it was about love. In the spring of 1885, Zelda gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Thomas Fletcher Thornton after both grandfathers. He was strong and healthy, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and his arrival brought joy to the entire family. Martha doted on her grandson, and Thomas could often be found rocking the baby and telling him stories about the old days. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Lily Martha. She was smaller and more delicate than her brother had been, but she had a fierce spirit that reminded Fletcher of Zelda. Watching his wife with their children, seeing the gentle patience and deep love she showed them, Fletcher often thought about how close he had come to never meeting her. If he had chosen a different day to go into town, if he had gone to a different saloon, if he had been less observant or less willing to help a stranger in need, none of this would exist. "What are you thinking about?" Zelda asked one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. Tommy was chasing fireflies while Lily toddled after him, her laughter bright in the warm air. "About how lucky I am," Fletcher said honestly. "About how one decision, one moment of choosing to do the right thing led to all of this." Zelda leaned against him, fitting perfectly into his side as she always did. "I think about that too, about what my life would have been if you hadn't walked into that saloon when you did." "Don't," Fletcher said, tightening his arm around her. "That's not a world I want to imagine. Me neither." She tilted her face up to kiss him softly. "I'd rather focus on this world, the one where I'm loved and safe and happy. Always," Fletcher promised. "I'll always keep you safe and loved." In 1889, a second son arrived, whom they named Jacob after Fletcher's late brother. Martha wept happy tears when they told her, touched beyond words, that they would honor Jacob's memory this way. Little Jake, as he quickly became known, was a whirlwind of energy and mischief, keeping his parents on their toes and making his siblings laugh with his antics. The ranch continued to prosper under the combined efforts of the family. Thomas began to slow down as the years passed, content to let Fletcher take on more and more of the management while he enjoyed his grandchildren and puttered in the workshop. Martha remained active and involved, teaching Zelda and later her granddaughter all the skills and knowledge she had accumulated over a lifetime. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and the children were asleep, Fletcher and Zelda would lie together in the darkness and talk about everything and nothing. These were some of Zelda's favorite moments, when Fletcher would trace idle patterns on her skin and tell her about his day, or when she would share her dreams for their children's futures. "You ever regret it?" Fletcher asked one such night in the winter of 1891. "Marrying so quickly, tying yourself to me and this ranch? Never," Zelda said firmly. "Not once, not for a second. You gave me everything I needed when I had nothing. You loved me when I felt unlovable. How could I ever regret that? I just want to make sure you're happy." Fletcher Thornton, "I am happier than I have any right to be. I have a husband I adore, 3 beautiful children, work that fulfills me, and family who loves me. What more could anyone want?" "When you put it that way," Fletcher said with a smile she could hear in his voice, "it does sound pretty good. Pretty good. It's perfect." She rolled over to face him, even though she could barely see him in the darkness. "You're perfect. This life we've built is perfect." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and showed her without words just how much he loved her. In 1894, Thomas Thornton passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. It was a sad time for the family, but there was comfort in knowing he had lived a full life and died surrounded by love. Martha took the loss hard but found solace in her grandchildren, and in the knowledge that Thomas had seen the ranch secure in Fletcher's capable hands. Fletcher stepped fully into the role of ranch owner, and Zelda became his full partner in managing the operation. Together, they navigated the challenges of drought and economic downturns, always finding a way through. Their reputation for fairness and quality spread, and the Double T became known throughout the region as a well-run, prosperous operation. The children grew strong and capable. Tommy showed a natural talent for working with horses, and announced at 15 that he wanted to breed and train them professionally. Fletcher and Zelda supported this dream, helping him start his own small operation on a corner of the ranch property. Lily proved to have her grandmother Martha's gift for healing and herb lore. She talked about maybe becoming a doctor someday, an ambitious dream for a girl in the 1890s, but Zelda encouraged her fiercely. If anyone could break through the barriers facing women in medicine, it was her determined, brilliant daughter. Jake was still trying to find his path, bouncing between interests with the enthusiasm of youth. Sometimes he wanted to be a rancher like his father, other times a lawman, still other times a school teacher. Fletcher told him there was no rush, that he had time to figure out who he wanted to be. On a warm summer evening in 1898, Fletcher and Zelda stood on their porch watching the sun set just as they had countless times before. 15 years had passed since that fateful day in the saloon in Columbia. Zelda was 35 now, her dark hair showing the first threads of silver. Fletcher was 41, with lines around his eyes that came from years of squinting into the sun and smiling at his wife and children. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Zelda asked, taking Fletcher's hand in hers. "In the saloon, I said a lot of things." "You said mistakes don't matter here." Zelda squeezed his hand. "Those words changed my life. They made me realize that I didn't have to keep punishing myself for things that weren't my fault, that I deserved kindness and safety and love." Fletcher pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind so they could watch the sunset together. "You deserved all of that and more. I'm just glad I was the one who got to give it to you." "We gave it to each other," Zelda said, echoing the words he had spoken on their wedding day. "That's how the best marriages work." They stood there as the sky shifted from gold to orange to purple, as the first stars began to appear overhead, as the sounds of their children's laughter drifted from inside the house. This was what happiness looked like, Zelda thought. Not a grand dramatic gesture or a perfect fairy tale, but this collection of ordinary moments strung together like pearls on a string. Days of hard work and nights of quiet contentment. Children growing and love deepening. A partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. In 1902, Martha passed away at the age of 73, joining her beloved husband and first son. It was the end of an era, but her legacy lived on in the grandchildren she had loved so well and in the lessons she had taught about kindness, resilience, and the importance of family. Tommy married a girl from a neighboring ranch in 1903 and brought his bride, Sarah, to live in the house where Fletcher had grown up. They soon blessed the family with the first of the next generation, a little girl they named Martha in honor of her great-grandmother. Lily did indeed pursue her dream of becoming a doctor, attending medical school in San Francisco to the shock and admiration of everyone who knew her. She wrote home regularly, her letters full of stories about her studies and her determination to make a difference in the world. Zelda kept every single letter in a special box, so proud of her daughter's courage and ambition she could hardly stand it. Jake found his calling in education after all, taking a position as a teacher in Columbia's growing school. He was patient and enthusiastic, beloved by his students, and Zelda saw echoes of her own father in the way Jake approached his work with dedication and care. As Fletcher and Zelda entered their 50s, they began to slow down somewhat, content to let Tommy take on more of the ranch's day-to-day operations while they focused on the parts they enjoyed most. Fletcher still rode out most mornings to check on the cattle and horses, and Zelda still managed the books and handled correspondence, but they also made more time for each other and for the simple pleasures of life. They took long walks in the evenings, visited with their growing collection of grandchildren, and sometimes, on special occasions, they rode back to the creek where Fletcher had first told Zelda he loved her. That spot remained special to them, a physical reminder of where their life together had truly begun. On their 20th wedding anniversary in October of 1905, Fletcher surprised Zelda with a trip to San Francisco to visit Lily, who was in her final year of medical school. It was Zelda's first time seeing the ocean, and she stood on the beach with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the beauty and vastness of it. "I never thought I'd see something like this," she told Fletcher as they walked hand in hand along the shore. "When I was living with Alina, I never thought I'd leave Columbia, much less see the ocean. Life is full of surprises, Fletcher said. Most of them good if you're lucky enough to find the right partner. They watched Lily's graduation in 1906, bursting with pride as their daughter became doctor. Lily Thornton, one of the few female physicians in California. She decided to open a practice in a small mining town in the Sierra foothills, wanting to bring medical care to people who often went without. It was exactly the kind of thing Martha would have done, and Zelda knew her mother-in-law would have been so proud. As the years continued to pass, Fletcher and Zelda settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long and happy marriage. They knew each other so well that they could communicate with just a look, could anticipate each other's needs before they were spoken. The passion of their early years had mellowed into something deeper and more enduring, a love that was woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. Jake married in 1908, and Tommy and Sarah welcomed their fourth child in 1909. The ranch house that had once seemed so quiet now rang with the voices of grandchildren during Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. Fletcher built a long table that could seat everyone, and Zelda presided over these meals with joy, looking around at the family they had created and feeling grateful beyond measure. Sometimes, when a particularly beautiful sunset painted the sky, or when Fletcher said something that made her laugh until she cried, or when she held a new grandchild in her arms, Zelda would think back to that desperate girl stumbling into a saloon with a bruised face and nowhere to go. She would think about Fletcher catching her, about him saying those words that had set her free. Mistakes don't matter here. It had been more than a promise of safety. It had been an invitation to a new life, a life where she was valued and loved and allowed to be fully herself. Fletcher had given her that gift, and every day since, she had tried to give it back to him in 1,000 small ways. In the summer of 1912, Fletcher and Zelda celebrated their 50th birthdays, Fletcher in May and Zelda in July. The family threw a grand party at the ranch, with friends and neighbors from all over the county attending. There was food and music and dancing, and Fletcher and Zelda were toasted repeatedly for their long marriage and the legacy they had built. As the party wound down and the guests began to drift away, Fletcher led Zelda out onto the porch where they had spent so many evenings together. The stars overhead were brilliant, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. He put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him as naturally as breathing. "You know what I was thinking today?" Zelda asked softly. "I was thinking that I've now spent more of my life with you than without you. That's a profound thing, Fletcher. You've been my partner and my love for 30 years, and I can't imagine any version of my life without you in it." "I can't either," Fletcher said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Zelda Thornton, the very best thing." "We saved each other," she reminded him, "and we built something beautiful together." They stood there in the quiet of the night, surrounded by the land they had worked and the family they had raised, and the love that had sustained them through 3 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. This was the happy ending Zelda had never dared to dream of, and it was more than she could have imagined. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real and earned and shared with a man who had shown her, all those years ago, that mistakes don't matter when you have someone who believes in you. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and eternal, bearing witness to a love that had grown from the ashes of pain into something beautiful and lasting. Fletcher kissed the top of Zelda's head, and she smiled against his chest, feeling the steady, reassuring beat of his heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but tonight they stood together as they always had and always would. 2 souls who had found each other at exactly the right moment, and built a lifetime of love from that single act of kindness in a dusty saloon long ago.